Who do we think are the top three gaming icons of Nintendo? This is Systematic Ecology. We are the Priests of the Geeks, continuing on in our gaming icon series. And I don't just mean, you know, all the different gaming icons in the world. We're going to cover all that. But right now, we're focusing solely on Nintendo. And I mean we, because it's not just me, Christian Ashley. I am joined by a fellow host, Herbie Ramsey. How's it going, Herbie?
It's going all right. How are you doing?
All right, man. It's about time to get back into school. That mixed feeling of like, oh, I have a purpose behind what I'm doing again, but also I've been doing nothing, so it's nice not doing anything, but also it would be nice to do something again. I mean, that wishy-washy state.
It'd be nice to live two doors down from me.
Yeah, yes, it would. And that'll be fairly soon, next week even. So, Herbie, as part of this series, one of the things we've been doing, just discussing icons in general, but like people that we ourselves look up to. Is there share one person that you yourself like look up to, real, fictional, have at it?
Well, I one of the Nintendo icons that I've chosen, Link. I've always kind of admired that character, and here
Oh yeah,
you'll see where I've got him placed here in the Nintendo icons coming up in a little bit, guys.
perfect. Now, me, I mean, yeah, go ahead and Jesus juke everyone here. Uh, I, ever since I learned about who he was, and a decade ago maybe, have always been a huge fan of Jan Hus, the Czech reformer who was fighting against some Catholic ideals that were going against what the Catholic Church should have been. He was trying to bring reform there, and kind of a proto reformer of the Protestant circle. He would have definitely agreed with some things Luther said, some things not so much. So I did admire his fighting against adversity in the face of the fact that he was eventually martyred for his beliefs. So there's that. Just to start on a cheery note for everyone. Let's do that. So today we're going to be continuing on through the series, this time focusing on the different and very fun worlds of Nintendo. Now, Herbie, I what about Nintendo is something that like you find yourself in? Like, what's your history with it? Have at it.
So when I was growing up, we had an old NES. It was a generation behind, even when I was a kid, that I had an NES, and that's what I grew up playing. On the next generation of consoles, my family swapped to Sega, and then we got back in on the N64, and I kind of kept up with it a little bit after that. Like I owned a GameCube, I owned a Wii. Then the next Nintendo that I owned was a Switch. So there is some parts of the Nintendo world that I just never played. Like I've never owned a Super Nintendo. So there's a huge amount of games that I've just never played. The only Super Nintendo games that I played is Super Mario World briefly, and uh, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Other than that, nothing on the Super Nintendo. So there's a huge bit of icons that I just never got exposed to.
Yeah. Conversely, the Super Nintendo was my first ever console. I typically got them about a generation behind everyone. Working off of that high school teacher's salary didn't really leave a lot in the funds for gaming or other things that people might see frivolous. But my dad was one of those people. He loved gaming as a kid. He loved arcades, and he wanted to do the same thing now for us and for him because he still plays now. He's on his Xbox a lot of the time when he does have the time. He's allegedly retired, but man works like 60, 70 hours a week. It's insane. But he introduced me to the Super Nintendo, and I kind of have an atypical history with the console compared to everyone else. My gaming was more stuff like, Spider-Man and the X-Men Arcades Revenge, the Phantom 2040, oh goodness gracious, what other the Star Wars series when they came on there. So I never really played a lot of the major like Nintendo characters and their series and stuff like that. The sole exception to that would be Super Mario World, which was my introduction to Super Mario Brothers and the lifelong hatred for platforming, which continues, like I said, to this day, because my fat fingers and terrible reaction times are not meant to be played alongside a platforming game.
I remember our Twitch stream that we did, and
Oh my
you
gosh.
did struggle. You struggled. You hung in there. But you struggled.
Yeah, I held in out of sheer pettiness and a desire to see how far I could actually get. But like, no, I'm still bad to this day. It's like anytime there's a platforming section in a game, it's like, well, I'm gonna pray to Jesus because that's the only way I'm getting through this.
Those were my games though. Like I enjoyed the platforming. That is still to this day the games that I enjoy. Like I enjoyed the Mario games. I enjoyed the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy on the Genesis, and I am sure you would absolutely hate the Sonic games with the vengeance. You would want them to burn because those are all about instant reaction times.
Oh, absolutely. I had a friend who had one of the games, and he let me play it one time, and I was about to burn the world. I was done. Yeah, not for me, but I'm glad other people get enjoyment out of them. So as far as Nintendo goes, like I barely played like a couple minutes of a Zelda game at my cousin's house. I think it was Majora's Mask. Um, I didn't get into the Metroid games or F Zero or really anything until about Super Smash Brothers. Melee was what console was that on? Do you
Melee
remember?
was the GameCube, I believe.
GameCube. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I had a bunch of friends in college who had a GameCube and had that game, and that was really my introduction to a lot of these characters that like I knew existed, but had no relationship with them, and that's yeah. Some of that will be part of my history. So I'm kind of an atypical lead for this episode, as we'll find out as time goes on. So I know some people out there you're really big into Nintendo stuff, and I appreciate that. Just don't expect that coming from my end. I just want to temper everyone's expectations at the start here. All right. So as we've gone through the series, we're typically doing the top three. We're going to stick to that today. Herbie, your number three of all time, your personal gaming icon doesn't have to be what you think other people would think. It's like for you, who's your number three? If they can't see it on
Well,
YouTube right now.
my number three, I'm gonna just go out there with Kirby's Adventure. Wasn't the biggest Kirby gamer out there, but coming as an adult playing the games, that I've always enjoyed the character of Kirby, but the gameplay is pretty good. It was the last NES game to come out was Kirby's Adventure. One thing I've always loved about Kirby is how he takes the enemy's powers, he adapts, and that is basically his thing. He eats something and becomes something else.
So like for anyone who doesn't like know who Kirby is, like besides what you've said, like what else could you offer for like what's he about? What are the games about?
I mean, it's a platformer, so I know you're probably not going to enjoy it as much.
Nope. Yeah. Um yeah, I feel this is a solid pick. I mean, Kirby is just one of those characters like over time that like it's this pink blob who just sucks things in and like gains different abilities from him. I have never once played a Kirby game in my life. My sole relation to him is through Super Smash Brothers. So uh, I have recently gained a higher opinion of him. I have always been terrible with him in the game, but one of those adventure mode settings that they have in Ultimate or whatever, where you just have to go over different maps to get new characters, whatever that's called, you're
The
stuck with him at the
storyline.
very beginning. Yeah. And so I had to learn how to use him in order to get other characters. So I gained an appreciation for him because all the characters I got were people I didn't main or anything like that. So yeah, I like Kirby, this little fat, pink blob. He's a pretty cool guy.
There's
So,
another
but
thing of
go
a
ahead.
lot of times when I introduce myself to people, they always mishear Herbie as Kirby. And so a lot of people know me as Kirby for whatever reason. They just can't hear Herbie.
I have heard it live several times before, and yeah, it's one of those annoying things. It's like, you know what? Just got to deal with it.
Yep.
It's like, your name's Christian. Are you Christian? Everyone thinks they're a comedian.
Well,
Well,
no,
when they
actually, on
learn,
mine, they totally just mishear it and they think I actually am saying Kirby.
that's fair. Different
All
scenarios
right.
then. So,
Moving on to
like,
your number three.
well, like, particularly with Kirby, like, what's about his character, like, for you? Like, why was he your number three? Like, why are you putting him on this pedestal here?
Well, honestly, it really is a solid gameplay. He's got that adaptability. He has to adapt to what's going on around him. He gets strength from dealing with his enemies, and that's just always been appealing to me.
Okay. So part of the series we've been doing is that we're talking about how we want to emulate certain aspects of the character, or, and since I'm in charge, I'll say this word instead, how we're going to excise different aspects of them we don't like about them. So, like when Kirby specifically comes to you as a character, like what would you emulate? What would you excise about him?
Emulate. The adaptability, the ability to change, to do what you need to do. The excise part, I'm not as familiar with those later parts, so I don't really know as much about his actual personality. So it's kind of hard to pick the excise part.
No, that's fair.
Probably make
I
him
mean,
not so small and make him not a balloon.
there's something to say about overeating. Maybe that might be an issue, or maybe he doesn't need to worry about overeating. I'm not big into the character. I don't know, but yeah, that was Herbie's number three. Kirby, his three. My number three, as we go through this, is going to be Samus Aran. Now, I when Samus first came up, if you don't know who Samus is, well, guess what? There's a trope for a reason. Samus is a girl, and that's something that people found out over time. You got this uh, seemingly muscle bound person inside of this suit of armor that's one of the most iconic armor sets I can think of, that rolls into a ball to get into other places, that created the Metroidvania kind of game, where it's kind of a blend of Castlevania and Metroid, um, where it's kind of a platformer, kind of also exploration, depending on the different games. I have not played that many. I'll get to that in a moment. But she is a bounty hunter who is constantly in conflict. Oh, goodness gracious. Why am I saying this? Proper nouns are not coming to me. The Metroids are the main alien force in the series. I'm getting old. I can't be doing this too often. And like how they keep coming up here, and she's got Ridley the giant, space dragon that is constantly fighting Samus as well. It's as you're traveling from space to these different planets and the like. It's fun. Depending on the game, could just be, your typical Metroidvania style. There's also exploration games out there. But why her? I love her tenacity. I love the fact that there's a problem. I'm gonna solve the problem even if I'm the only person fighting against the problem. That's kind of been her shtick. I've once again, I have not played that many games with her. Smash would probably be my main. Oh, she is one of my mains. We'll find out later. Where I haven't really gone too much into her games, but I have watched other people play some Metroid games, so I've got to appreciate her character more. I'm with everyone else. Other M is one of the biggest travesties because it removes a lot of her agency as a character, and I can't stand for that. So I also love, once again, adaptability would be a huge one as well. Is that she's forced into situations, yet tenaciousness can only get you so far. You've also got to be able to roll with the punches, and she can literally roll wherever she needs to go. So, as far as
Literally
aspects of
roll.
like, you shouldn't laugh at your own jokes, but I do anyways. Uh, for her, like, what would I emulate? What would I excise? Um, Definitely the same thing. It's like you need to be able to be adaptable. You need to be able to figure out, okay, the plan isn't working. What do I do now? What resources do I have at my disposal to then make things where I come out on top? And she's going to suffer a lot of harm. She's going to suffer a lot of being forced to terrible situations, but she's going to come out on top and she's going to get her man. She's going to figure out what needs to get done. She'll blow up whenever it needs to get blown up. And I greatly admire that about a person. If they're driven in that sense, to where it doesn't matter what gets thrown against them. Like, hey, let's keep going. We got to get a job done. You kind of need that. No, not only in life but in ministry as well. Not in the sense of well, I'm going to blow up everything in my path, but like, hey, certain things need to get done. Let's do them. So I admire people like that more. Uh, I'm fairly adaptable, but I'm also lazy. So that kind of contrasts at time. Now, as far as excising things from her, without knowing too much of her character, I have seen brief moments of maybe letting anger take her too much. And once again, I'm not the biggest like Samus fan in the world as far as I played all the games, I know everything that happens. But what I have seen is like sometimes she can be led astray by that, or her emotions or stuff like that. And I would excise that aspect a little bit. And that's not saying these emotions are bad, it's how you utilize them. Because there's a certain thing about, having a righteous anger when something happens that is evil. And I would definitely get rid of her submissiveness that was in Other M, because that's not really Samus. And I know this is not very unpopular opinion to have, but it needs to be said.
Well, there was a bit of submission in the Game Boy game where she didn't use weapons, and when you got a power up, it was because it was authorized to finally be able to be used. So there was a bit of
Oh yeah.
submission in the beginning. Uh, I was thinking the one thing you might want to excise was how in the first game, or was it the second game, the reason we know she was a female is because the higher your score was, the more she would undress her armor. And I don't think
Oh,
that's something we should
well,
emulate.
I'm. Probably shouldn't be, just taking off as many clothes as possible. But that's not her fault. That's a programming thing.
But she is a
And
programming
like,
thing at this point. So
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that's a developer kind of thing, not
that's
her
an Easter
fault.
egg, not her.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't know that she was a woman until like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after encountering her for the first time in Super Smash Brothers. And I was like, oh, cool. And then I moved on with my life. Some people, I don't know why. It's just as soon as they learn that, they just stop liking the character. And it's like, how much, inherent misogyny do you have in yourself where you're just like, oh, well, I wasted all my time because I was playing a chick. So I don't get it. All
I
right.
mean,
Go ahead.
so we're going to move on to our number two picks.
Oh, that we are, my friend. Your number
All
two
right.
pick being.
My number two pick is going to be Fox McCloud from Star Fox, specifically from Star Fox 64, because that is the one I played. And that's also the one that Fox McCloud is from. And I've always just really loved the game. The character was always a big icon to me. He always had like the cool look, had the witty replies. He was the big leader. He saves the entire Lilat system. Uh, as far as the things from him that he should emulate, he was just a really good leader. He kept his team together. He kept them going through the fight, and he destroyed Andros. Like he was a fighter to the end. Um, what not to emulate about him? He was a mercenary. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think we should be emulating people who just go to war specifically for the money.
Taking a strong stance there.
Yeah,
Anti-mercenary Herbie.
yeah. What can I say?
Okay. Okay. So, like, besides 64, are there any other games you played with Fox in it?
I'm gonna be honest with you. No, I did not play anything else besides that.
That's fine. Because this is also the only game besides Super Smash Brothers. Oh, there'll be a recurring theme in this episode. But I have not played any games, and I barely played 64. And a lot of that is just because
I have played
vehicles
Smash
and
Brothers,
me,
so if that counts.
yes. Yeah, vehicles and I typically don't get along in games. Uh, piloting something outside of like Star Wars Rogue Squadron, where I had to learn and adapt a little more. I was awful. Like I was just thinking the other day of restarting the Arkham Asylum series for Batman, and it's like, no, I'm not going all the way tonight, and I'm not playing that stupid Batmobile tank one more time. I'm done with this series. If I play through it all, I'm gonna want to play that one too. No, I'm just bad at it. So this game, do have fond memories. I had a family friend who had it and would play with me every now and then, but he was also very patient because I sucked at the game. But I appreciated what it is, and it is star fighting system is super cool. I'm sure it's just janky now, but like at the time, it was perfectly fine. It worked really well. There's a reason I know this was a lot of people's introduction to him as a character too. Um, Outside of Smash, and I'm terrible with him at Smash. Could never get his like double jump mechanic or the whatever you call it, where he rockets up to work in my favor, and I typically don't use characters like that. So yeah, Fox is a solid pick. Anything else you'd like to say about him before we move on?
No, that's about all. I mean, it was a simple character, simple pick.
Okay. Well, that will bring us to my number two character. And I should probably say, as part of this list, I don't necessarily like my favorites. I'm trying to think in totality of what I would pick versus as well what kind of would be the main picks in society. And this is definitely more of a main pick in society, as evidenced by my earlier comments. And that being, of course, Mario, the main character of the Super Mario Brothers, and of course, the original Donkey Kong game way back in the day, which was probably my no, Super Mario was World was definitely my introduction. I didn't play the arcade game after that. So, Mario, what's there to say about Mario that hadn't been said before? If you've never played a Mario game at all, like I don't know where you live, I don't know your financial situation. I'm guessing those may have been motivating factors into why you never saw him at all. Mario is kind of your typical, just generic video game guy. He is an Italianish plumber who is, you know, solving problems in the Mushroom Kingdom as they happen every single game or whatever alternate reality world they're in, typically caused by Bowser or one of his minions or a new villain introduced in the game where, Princess Peach maybe, kidnapped or someone else is threatening the throne or what have you, or threatening the land. And it's his job to jump, skip, fly, and collect every single coin that you can find. Sometimes riding Yoshi, sometimes causing Yoshi to fall down. Mostly me because I didn't know the buttons that well. And I mean, what else can you say about Mario before we continue, Irvy?
I mean, he kind of basically is that generic guy. He was the face to make the platforming game. Like, what can you really say about that?
Yeah,
I mean, he's a plumber.
and
He was a carpenter when he was fighting Donkey Kong, so I guess you could say he's got multiple skill sets.
you know what? That's something admirable about a person that they have many, uh, let's say, handy skills like that. And I say that as someone who is worthless with his hands if it doesn't involve like typing or writing. Like I admire that really in other people that they have those skills because the moment my brain and hands try to work together on a project or like even using like a ruler or what have you, like there's a disconnect. So for someone like that who gets that stuff done and keeps our society running stable, they have all the praise in the world in my book. But like what? Okay, so I've said it before. I haven't played too many Mario games. I've watched a couple playthroughs of other games. I've played, Mario Party and Mario Kart. But like, what about him makes him stand out to me? Was that he is a generic guy, but we all kind of love him to an extent. Like he does the job. We know he's competent at the job because they keep asking him to come back and do it, not just because it's the franchise and you'd have to have him come back. But hey, like how many Koopas has he stomped on the entire time? Like how many times has he thwarted Bowser's plans? How many times has he rescued Princess Peach? How many times has he rescued Toad? And so on and so forth. Well, when a guy gives you results and you get to play as that guy, you actually are good at the game, unlike me. That kind of gives you a sense of self-satisfaction, doesn't it? Like, uh, I would like to replay a game like that where I get that sense of I accomplished something. I did something well for everyone. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's great. I mean, he's how many years old now and still can jump how much higher than those turtles? Like, yeah, he's the guy who goes in and gets it done. Sometimes he burns Bowser to death. Sometimes he hops on his head until he's dead.
Sometimes to go hang out and have some party games or go karting together, and
Or
I
he rides a
once again,
dinosaur.
yeah, or everybody's a dinosaur. As far as like emulating aspects of Mario and excising aspects, I do think, obviously for the sake of like Mario Party and Mario Kart, like setting aside old bits of anguish and hatred are done in the sake of just having a fun game. But like in that sense, there's something we can learn there and appreciate. Is like sometimes you have to let old wounds just die. Yeah, sometimes you have to extend that hand of forgiveness and hang out the people and hang out with people. And if they are not like taking advantage of you, keep hanging out with them. Keep sharing that uh, invitation to be better, to do and have fun with each other. And yeah, it's kind of a weird take to get from this, but isn't it? what we're taught to do, like not forgive and forget, because that's never been a biblical principle, and anyone who tells you does has never read the Bible. But what's your take on that idea?
I think it'd be a lot easier for Mario to forgive Bowser if he quit kidnapping the princess.
Because he's not as personally affected.
I mean, let's be honest with you. Like, I mean, there's no repentance. He just keeps on kidnapping Peach. I mean, what can you say? Do you really want him to forgive and then just have Peach stolen again?
And sometimes there's a pragmatic reason to forgive people. So that makes sense too. So, but always keep an eye on them, because you never know when the next sequel comes around and they've, Bowser has stolen Princess Peach again or taken over a city or what have you. So that's kind of a jokey answer to an extent, but I also kind of believe in it. Uh, Another thing I'd emulate is just like competence. Like, look, a Mario played well, a Mario not played by me, is an extremely competent person. They face that adversity. They face every trial that comes their way. They collect every coin that they need to on their way to getting to where they need to go to save Princess Peach or solve whatever puzzle they're in the midst of. And that's something admirable to look up to. Excising, I don't know, much like me, we should probably both lose some weight. Uh, Not exactly the best part of living in the world. I don't know. Anything else you want to add, Herbie, for Mario?
I mean, for Mario, it's hard to say something to get rid of just because he is such a simple character. Like, he doesn't even have a big, like, personality arc. There's not a big storyline in a Mario universe. It's Peach is stolen, well, kidnapped. I shouldn't say stolen, but yeah, it's kind of hard to say something to take away when it is very simple in a character.
Yeah, I was really struggling to find an answer to this because he's just that generic at times. And that's okay because obviously people love him, even though he's just a generic Joe. So why fix what's not broken?
All right, let's move into our top picks.
Let's do it. All right. Your
Mine is
number
going to
one
be
pick.
Link from The Legend of Zelda. I mean, Zelda's always been a favorite franchise of mine, and if you are a fan of The Legend of Zelda, you have to be a fan of Link. If not, you're probably not really a fan of the games because you're going to be seeing him the entire time because he is the link between you and the game. Uh, he's got the Triforce of Courage. He's a very courageous person. He goes and he saves the princess or defeats Ganon or any of the other like minor villains in the franchise. Generally, it is Ganondorf, but he goes, he saves the princess. He sometimes puts the Triforce together. Sometimes he goes to get the number 3 Triforce when nobody knew it existed until the second game. But honestly, like he is that like ideal youth who goes to save the kingdom.
Mhm.
Uh, what's emulated him is the courage to go out and do it. It needs to be done. Sometimes you got to learn new skills. Sometimes you got to learn how to use new equipment. Sometimes you just got to learn how to fight. And sometimes that's a skill issue on the player's end. And Zelda 2, my favorite game, is going to tell you it is your fault as a player that you can't beat that enemy. Uh, what you should get rid of in him, again, as well developed as the Zelda franchise is, Link is kind of intentionally left to be simple because it kind of is. It really helps you identify with the character when it doesn't really have a whole lot of traits to him. But the one thing I really wish you could get rid of is the fact that when there's a direct sequel and it's the same Link in the two games, why does he have to forget everything and lose all of his equipment? You shouldn't forget things like that halfway through your life.
Yeah, it's the Sora issue of, well, every game passes, and I'm going to lose all my abilities the next time the next game comes through. Even though I think there's less of a reason sometimes. Well, because understanding Zelda's timeline, which I've never attempted to do, different games take place over hundreds of years because of reincarnation and alternate universes and stuff like that. So some of
It's
that's
very rarely the
explainable.
same. So it's very rare that it is the same Link in two games. There's very few direct sequels. Like you have the same Link
Yeah.
in Majora's Mask as you do in Ocarina of Time, same Link in Zelda 2 as in Zelda 1. And I'm trying to think. I think well, the obvious one, you've got Breath of the Wild, the same link as the Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes. Okay.
So like, very rare that it is the case, but for it's a different Link and a Link to the Past than the original Zelda. It's a different in Ocarina of Time as it is Breath of the Wild. It's just they, as the need comes up, a new Link comes out as a different Zelda in every one. However, if I'm not mistaken in the lore, and I don't think I am, it is the same Ganon in every game.
That's my understanding as well. I don't pretend to understand the cosmology and the history of the Zeldaverse as it is, but I think Ganon is kind of like the one like constant in that it's always the same evil dude who is what is he again in the Triforce?
He takes the Triforce of Power.
Power, that's right. Yeah. So seeing him get foiled and foiled again by this little blonde elven Hylian guy, it does amuse me a lot. As someone who is once again only played a couple of minutes of Majora's Mask and tried him on Super Smash Brothers, and much like Mario, found out he's just not for me.
I mean, courage is going to be power every time if you trust the Legend of Zelda.
Mm, there you go. So, have you played the newer games?
I have played Breath of the Wild. It wasn't my favorite. They did a lot with the open world in the Breath of the Wild. I feel like that it was too open for the way that Zelda has always been in the past. It started off pretty open, and for the most part, has always had open world concepts, but not completely wide open where you can just rush to the very end. There were basically like soft blocks in the game to where you kind of needed to go through certain things to get a little bit further, but it wasn't like, oh no, I need to unlock this door. No, it's like, well, you're going to start fighting these lionels. You kind of want to have more hearts before you go fight a lionel. Those are some
Hmm.
really tough guys. But Link can do
Yeah,
it with
I
the
did.
courage.
Okay. Yeah, I watched a streamer play the first game and learned, yeah, I'm not touching that one because there are puzzles and puzzles in the game, and I am not a puzzle guy. My mind turns to mush the
Well, the
moment a
first one,
puzzle shows
not
up. It's
only
like,
not only are there
yeah,
puzzles, there are cryptic secrets that you just do not know except for trial and error. Oh, you can burn this
oh
bush
gosh,
that's out of random place that you would never think to burn, and there's a secret in there. You can
that one
randomly
I'm
bomb
not that.
this wall and find a door going through it.
Those are more fun, almost Easter eggish kind of things that I'm okay with. Like if it's for required progression in the game, I'm looking it up online. Your boy doesn't have time to figure out a puzzle. Someone else going to figure out that puzzle for him, and then I'm going to hopefully do it myself. So yeah, your number one pick for Nintendo icons. Link. Anything else you'd like to say about them?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. So I'm going for my number one pick of Nintendo, and this, of course, being the game series I have played the most throughout Nintendo's history on every single console that they've ever brought out. And that, of course, being my number one pick, Pikachu of the Pokemon series. Why Pikachu? Well, if you don't know who Pikachu is, once again, I don't understand how you're listening to this episode. Is it even possible? Have you? Are there rocks that really you just jumped out of? The first thing I'm going to do is listen to a systematic ecology episode. Well, welcome. I'm happy that you're here. But Pikachu, how to describe Pikachu? Well, you have to describe Pokemon. Pokemon is that game where you collect and capture different animal creatures and sometimes not animals at all that are living in the world of, you know, oh goodness gracious, Kanto for the first game, and you go to different countries after that where they have different typings, there are different moves that they have. You know, Pikachu, of course, being an electric type that when you first have red and blue, not that he's in Viridian Forest maybe at the very beginning, but you're not going to see him too much in the game. I mean, honestly, probably Raichu shows up more times with Surge's Gym alone than you see Pikachu in other circles, if I remember correctly. But then you have the release of the anime, where Pikachu pretty much becomes like the mascot of the series. Because originally they were going to actually make it Clefairy at one point in time, if I remember correctly.
They
which
made
I'm
a
glad
good
they
choice
decided
to not
against
go
it.
there.
Oh, absolutely. Then you have, with the success of the anime, the release of Pokemon Yellow. And if there's a game I've replayed more, um, it might be Pokemon Black or Pokemon X. But right here, like I played the heck out of this game as a kid because you got to choose Pikachu as your starter. Then through the rest of the game, you could get the other starters from the base games. And with the sands of time, I'm about to repeat something that I said earlier, but you guys are going to hear before that. Um, I said as I almost totally forgot what I was about to say. Oh yeah, as a poor kid in North Kakalaki, who didn't have no fancy gaming cables and friends that also had gaming cables, it was not easy to get the other starters from the other games because you had to trade in between them. And it's not as easy as it is now. So a game that allowed me to do that won me a lot of respect. And Pikachu as part of that game was a lot of fun too. Yes, it was terrible against the first gym, but that was actually part of the challenge. And as a kid, I liked challenges, and I had to learn. Okay, well, Pikachu ain't gonna touch Geodude and Onyx. So what do I do? Build a team around him because I'm not getting rid of my starter. I'm not going to betray the first friend I ever made here. And I think that's one of the things that really stands out to me about Pikachu is his loyalty, not only including anime and games themselves. It's like you develop a bond with the sucker. Like it's the first time that friendship kind of matters as a mechanic in the Pokemon games. Is your attachment to your starter Pikachu, and it's like. Why would I ever give him up? Why would I ever give him a Thunderstone, even though it would make his stats better? But
Well, if you
you
do that,
get.
then he doesn't follow you around anymore. Like as soon as he is not Pikachu, as soon as he is not the Pikachu you start with, he doesn't follow you around on the overworld anymore.
And it's an absolute travesty. So you keep him as a Pikachu the entire game, and you feel at the end of the game like you've really won because you stuck with someone who wasn't the best bet at the very beginning, and yet now you've conquered the entire region. You're the champion. So I really enjoy that, like the bond you create between the two of you. And as far as characteristics to emulate and excise, um, I already talked about that in the other episode that will release later on. So I'm trying to find something new other than like, hey, you got to use what you have in front of you. If you're an electric type, be good against electric types. You got to also learn that someone else has got to take the job if you're not for the job. That's why there were Mankey. That's why there were Nidoran around in one of the other routes. So you could take them, get a double kick or a karate chop, and then get out of Brock's gym alive. Excising, I can't really think of anything else besides what I said that time either. Like, don't shock your friends, don't shock the people you care about. Show your aggression in other ways, more productive ways than electrocuting them. So that's what I got to say on that. What do you think, Herbie? Anything else?
I will say that I never was the smart kid to pick up on grabbing a grass type on the way to Brock and training the grass type to fight Brock because my brain just didn't want to have to deal with the RPG aspects of Pokemon. That's not my kind of game. I did play a lot of Pokemon Yellow though. Let's just say,
Oh
like,
yeah,
it was the only game I had for the Game Boy at the time. I spent a lot of time playing it.
excellent. Yeah. Okay. So now we're done. We've got our top three. Herbie, any other honorable mentions you want to shout out who could have possibly been on the list?
Honestly, not at this time.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna pick. Donkey Kong's definitely up there. Solid guy. Um, Captain Falcon. Once again, I only know him through Smash, and I definitely would never play a racing game. But yeah, is the Falcon Punch heading your way? What are you gonna do about it? I was never big into Fire Emblem, so I can't really pick anyone there. So yeah, those are some honorable mentions here. So if your favorite character wasn't mentioned, sorry, it's just how the episode kind of worked. Here we are right now. As we're about to stop this episode, we're also going to talk about real quick for our patrons and Apple Captivate supporters. We have a special bonus question. That's going to be who are our top mains? We talked about it the entire game for Super Smash Brothers. Um, so if that interests you, if you want to help support us in that way, please head those to Patreon or Captivate and send a little money there. If you're over the $3 tier, we'll even shout out your name live on the air. If you want to hear your name supporting one of your favorite podcasts, have at it. So Herbie, today, do you have a recommendation for the audience?
or something to geek out on, I am going to say that Skyrim is an amazing game you can always geek out on if you're looking to geek on something. It's been out for forever, and you can always grab a copy of it somewhere pretty cheap. And quite frankly, it's got such an in-depth storyline. You can spend 20 years playing that game.
You can't go wrong with Skyrim. I'm probably going to replay it later on this year. I mean, you just get the itch. And it's like, oh, I got to mod it again. What can I do this time that I didn't do last time? And I end up doing what I did the first time.
Stealth
So
Archer for the win.
yeah, Skyrim always a solid pick. Bethesda, get your butts in gear. We need Elder Scrolls 6. We need a title for the game, true. But my other
Need something more than
recommendation,
leaks.
right, would be Nosferatu. Saw the movie with Kevin not too long ago. Really enjoyed it. I think my opinion has grown since I saw the movie. I might even be willing to give it like a 9 or a 9.5 overall. Really solid horror flick. A great remake of the 1922 original. Just a fun time. But guys, thank you for all that you do. We appreciate everything that you bring our way, whether it's through financial support or just downloading the episodes. You guys are the best. If you're on YouTube, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel as well, comment down below. For podcast listeners, please leave a review, a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice to help us with the ratings, to find more people, so we can reach out and find more people who can throw episode suggestions our way, which we love to do as well. If you have any questions for it, send them to systematicecology@gmail.com. I'd like to shout out some of our patrons and supporters. Russell Gentry, Justin Vaughn, Annette Knoll, and Jeannie Mattingly. You guys are the best. But remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.